Warning. This memorandum contains a Class I, USB restricted memetic hazard. Access restrictions enforced by Pavlov Kafka inoculation credentialing. Credentials. Acknowledged. Access granted. Graham Corporation. Project. Clearance priority. Bostrom Kurzweil. USB Memorandum 052418. Re. Process Report 052118/0813118/123118. In accordance with the above, Divisions 1 through 6 are to be restructured as follows. Redacted. Restructuring in accordance with relevant task order. The new director will be chosen among the stables. Attachment for public dissemination as per UIU2.
Hi everyone, I'm Robert Reed, and I'm going to be doing another update, this time on Lain Protocol. Same game as last time, but I had an idea, an epiphany, so people can go to the Discord and always look up the patch notes, and they stipulate what changes I'm making to the game, how I feel about certain changes, the reasoning, what I plan on tackling next. But then I realized we live in a visual world. Most people aren't me. They respond better to something they can see. So I thought, hey, let's take some notes. And let's go over what they were. So earlier today, I played 2 games of Lain Protocol. It's a mandatory 4-player game, kind of like Fury of Dracula. So I just piloted the 4 little characters around and played 2 games. And so here's what I came up with. So both of the games, the timing is much, much better than it was previously. They were both slightly under 70 minutes, so that's cool. Before the game could last an hour and a half to 2 hours with experienced people, and we wouldn't even be done yet. We would just be killed before we were done. Recently, the game has changed so that now instead of players just reaching the center, they get to the center, get what they can, and then leave, as I promised in the previous video. So I was surprised to find that the game was actually shorter. Now that may be because I am the guy who made the game, and I'm piloting all 4 people, and I don't have to argue with anybody. Who's to say, right? But 70 minutes is a much better baseline, seeing as when I playtested with another guy last time, the game in the previous version was about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes, despite there being the 2 of us, both of us almost as knowledgeable as each other about how the game could play. So the next thing is variable player powers. So it's the first thing I went over in the patch notes. Basically, each player now has a unique probe, a unique brute force, and 2 unique exploits. They're not globally unique. You can obviously pick up copies through exploits as you go through and get more cards and successful hacks. But they're at the start of the game, there are basically 6 characters, 6 of these sets of 4 cards that you can start off with. And I just randomly gave myself 4 of them both times, and I think that felt a lot better. Some of them could be designed a little more efficiently, but most of them are made with interaction in mind, and I loved it. I actually found it was much easier to control the strength of enemies, determine what was easy and what was hard, and those things differed based on what characters I had, but there weren't any points where I thought, man, there is no way I'm going to be taking this out. This is ridiculous. It can't be done. That's not to say it's foolproof, but it's definitely a plus. So the next thing is log tokens. So before, log tokens had these weird rules, okay? For those of you who haven't seen it, log tokens go on a track up to 10. You get them throughout the game. And when you got 10, you took 5 damage or interference, but you start with 4 connection or 4 life. So you just die automatically. It doesn't feel very good. And then if you have 10 and you keep adding them, well then guess what? You go from 10 to 11, now you get more interference and more damage, and it just felt awful. Most people were dying because of log tokens more than any threats. I'm like, ew. That doesn't even thematically make sense. Like, if enough CCTVs stare at you in the face, do you just keel over and die? No, it doesn't make too much sense. So log tokens have been changed so that now, instead of killing you by mass damage, they just track you. And that change felt really good. I had people, me manipulating people went up to 10 log tokens. I was like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. We're good. We're fine. We got this. But the other change that went with it, with log tokens, the change to tracked, made that not feel inconsequential. So the change I made to tracked, and you can see in the patch notes in the Discord, which will be in the description box as always, the change that I recently made to tracked was, if you're tracked, you add 1 complication to the threat that you're fighting. And you do this for each player who is tracked. So if there's 4 people and then 3 of them are tracked, well then your threats have 3 complications added to it. And that felt really good because I won the second game and lost the first. I introduced that badly. So I lost the first game because the thing I was fighting up against had 6 complications. But it had 6 complications because 3 of my people were tracked, and those are direct things that I've done throughout the game. So that doesn't feel as bad. I rather liked it. The game that I won, I didn't have anyone get tracked. So I'll be looking at that more in the future. Next thing is payload. Rolling for payload feels so much better than just, all right, we probe it and we do 1 damage. Does everyone agree that we do 1 damage? Yeah, yeah, okay, that's all great. Here's the thing. I've playtested some other games. If you playtest those other games and they're PvP, it's players against players, or even if it's small teams of players against other small teams of players, you have to be very, very precise about your RNG because people can handle. Here's the thing, right? If your game is 5 to 10 minutes long, people can handle winning or losing because of RNG. That's fine. No one cares. If people beat or lose to each other because of RNG, well, you've just made 50% of the people in the game sour about life. So, no. But the benefit of the cooperative game that Lain Protocol is that you can have some RNG, and guess what? People are rolling more dice. It's harder for people to figure out, well, we can just do this and kill it automatically, can't we? We're in agreement then? All right, the Council of Shadowy Hackers just destroys this thing. No, you can't do that anymore. You have to roll dice. So, felt a lot better doing that. And that's not just me falling into my own hype. I've played some tests where I'm like, oh, this will be a really cool idea. It wasn't a cool idea, and I felt terrible as I was testing it, but this time it felt genuinely nice. There was one downside to payload, though, which is that some threats that normally just did 5 damage or 5 interference, you can't have those people dealing 5 payload, because you could get what I just got, and I put it in the Discord in general chat, where someone does double damage, double damage, double damage, double damage, miss. And so they're supposed to do about 4 to 6 damage on 5 dice, and they did 8. And the tank died, and that was just the end of the game. That is just a terrible feeling. So it might have to call down some of the higher payload or mitigate their rolls somehow. I think that's a good idea. Next thing, so for alert, getting to the center of the network and triggering alert felt really good. The problem is that because you then have to escape the network, the creatures and the threats, rather, that have alert and the complications that are tied to them need to be more powerful as they're inversely related to how close they are to the network. Okay, so right now, if you've seen the game, the things that are closest to the network are layer 12 and layer 15. They say that on the little bottom. It doesn't have any gameplay effect, but it's just a way of sorting the cards when you deal them out. So they'll always be closer to the network. I guess that is a gameplay effect. But my point is that you want the alert on those to be pretty weak. They're already really strong, and they're on areas that have more complications than normal, so you don't want that to be too strong. You'll be going overboard. So what I found out, though, is that once I got past those hard enemies in the game that I won, the weak enemies were absolutely a joke. I mean, they were terrible. They just don't have enough connection, enough payload. Their effects aren't as bad. They already have fewer complications, so their alert effects have to be stacked up. So that's an unintended side effect I didn't realize, is that I'm going to have to make alert for things that are very weak and very beginner, early on, easy combats. They're going to get alert effects that just make them absolute monsters to compensate for the fact that they won't have complications. It'll be later in the game. People will have more tools to fight them off with, etc., etc. So that's going to need a lot more tweaking. The center felt great. Ari said that. Interaction felt good. Because the interactions were better and because damage wasn't certain due to payload, the complexity was much better. I was sitting there thinking, is this the right thing to do, or is that the right thing to do? Well, this is the right thing to do if we get a bit of luck on these rolls, And that was a good feeling, because when you can't map out what every threat can do mathematically, then you don't have the feeling of one player who said, well, I could just be replaced by a bot and it wouldn't change anything. That's a terrible thing for someone to say. Well, I could be replaced by a bot. Nothing would change. Well, that means it's not interesting for them and that they feel the game is really simple. So I feel the complexity went up a bit, and I think the combination of the characters, the payload, the alert, all these things really helped with it. Difficulty, I think the difficulty went up, but in an artificial sense. So the game is more difficult, but that's only because before it was not trivial, but fairly simple, I would say. If you can understand the difference, if I can understand the difference even, but if you can understand what I'm trying to communicate, it's not as hard. It wasn't as hard originally to determine what a best set of plays were. Maybe there's a second option, maybe, but now, with more complexity and more uncertainty and more interactions, then the difficulty rises more as a function of the complexity than anything else. It's hard to keep track of that many variables in your head at the same time, or at least becomes more difficult. So nerfs and buffs. So biggest thing that needs a buff, guys, the weak threats that have alert, because they need to basically do a 180 and be almost the inverse on the power scale. Like if they're a 2 out of 10 when you're first going through the network, they need to be an 8 out of 10 when you're coming out the other side. Otherwise, it's just a terrible feeling like, oh, well, I guess we win because nothing else is threatening anymore experience, which, good to have that problem later than earlier, but it's still not a great problem to have. So those are going to need some buffs. I think noise was things that generate noise were indirectly buffed. So what I've done is that when people hit the center, noise doesn't matter anymore. Like you can't get any more noise, or there's no chance of losing because you go to 15 noise, and that's a dramatic buff over to noise. Some things may even have to be tweaked to be a little stronger, as strange rather as that sounds. The next thing are nerfs. Lots of things need to get nerfed. Lots of things that have high payload need to get nerfed. Some of the complications are absolutely maddening now in what they can do. There's one, I think it's called Backtracked, where you get one log token and one interference every turn. That is absurd. And if you haven't played the game yet, go play it. And the first time you run into that, you'll think, that's absurd, and you would be right. Other things worth mentioning. Just some various cards that need to be changed around because they were too weak, too strong, etc. Yeah, outside of that, I think everything worked out really well. I heard an adage once that said that if you think the game's difficulty is just about right, it's way too hard. So going 1-in-1 when I'm the only person and don't have complicating factors and know like the hidden details of all of these cards, almost like the back of my hand, game might still yet be too difficult, but that is something I think will be most exposed during blind playtesting, and this game's not anywhere near blind playtesting. We're still working on mechanics, for Christ's sake. So, yeah. Hopefully you found this interesting. If you did join the Lain Protocol Discord below, read some of those patch notes. My reasoning is a lot better, I think, there than it is in this video. But some people like audio, visual, talking, media, things to watch. So who can blame them? Certainly not I. Thank you for watching.
Adjustments to project. Stipulated as per above. DNE. John Doe. Former Director. USV Department.